My husband called me a fat pig in front of his friends. He laughed. They laughed. And I stood there frozen, humiliated. But what I did afterward, well, please stay with me as I tell you my story. And please do not forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones. My name is Emily. I'm 32 years old, and I have been married to Jake for 6 years. From the outside, we looked like a normal couple. I was the wife who made sure everything at home was taken care of. I cooked his favorite meals, kept the house spotless, supported him when he was trying to climb the ladder at work, and gave up some of my own dreams so he could chase his. I thought that was what love was supposed to be: sacrifice, patience, putting your partner first. Jake worked long hours, and I never complained. If he came home tired, I gave him space. If he was stressed, I listened without judgment. I wanted him to feel that he had someone in his corner no matter what. I believed marriage was about building each other up, and I thought he believed the same. That belief shattered one night at a dinner party. Jake had invited a few of his friends from work. They filled the living room, laughing loudly, sipping drinks, and joking about everything. I had spent the whole day preparing, cooking, cleaning, making sure everything looked perfect so Jake would be proud. I wore a dress I hadn't worn in years, hoping he might notice me. I wanted him to see that I still cared. As the night went on, the jokes got louder, and the drinks kept pouring. I was sitting next to him, quietly smiling, just happy he seemed to be enjoying himself. One of his friends made a light-hearted comment about his wife always nagging about food. They all laughed. Then Jake, without hesitation, pointed at me and said, "At least your wife isn't a fat pig like mine." For a second, I thought I misheard him. My heart froze, and my smile slipped away. But then I saw it, his wide grin, the way he leaned back in his chair as if he'd just said something clever. His friends burst out laughing, clapping him on the back like he'd just told the funniest joke of the night. I sat there, paralyzed. The word echoed in my head, pig. I could feel the heat rising in my face, my chest tightening like I couldn't breathe. My hands gripped the fabric of my dress under the table. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat, but it wouldn't go down. I wanted to disappear. Nobody defended me. Nobody told him to stop. They just kept laughing, and Jake kept smirking, proud of himself. I looked at him, the man I had loved and supported for years, and I didn't recognize him in that moment. It felt like he had ripped my heart out in front of everyone, and then expected me to keep smiling. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, silent, humiliated, pretending the food on my plate still mattered while inside, something in me broke. When I shut the bedroom door that night, the sound of laughter from the dining room still echoed in my skull. I'd smiled through it at the table, cheeks burning, throat tight, but as soon as I was alone, my legs gave out. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, and the words he used in front of his friends replayed on a cruel loop. It wasn't new. That was the sickest part. I remembered the way he had tossed little comments around our kitchen, like knives hidden in jokes. "You're not really going to eat seconds, are you?" Or the time I came back from the grocery store, and he smirked at my sweat-damp shirt. "No wonder you're always tired. You carry yourself like a cow." Alone, those moments used to sting but fade, and I told myself he was stressed, or maybe he didn't know how sharp his words were. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. But standing in front of his friends, hearing his voice grow louder so they could all laugh at me, that stripped the last excuse away. I lay back on the mattress, pulling the blanket up even though the house wasn't cold. From down the hall came the clink of glasses, his voice booming as if nothing had happened. He was still entertaining them, still basking in their laughter, as if my humiliation was just part of the evening's entertainment. And that was when the weight in my chest shifted. I had always carried his words like stones in my pocket, uncomfortable, heavy, but manageable if I kept my head down. That night they turned into an anchor. Every laugh from that room outside pulled me deeper into the truth. Jake didn't respect me. Not in private, not in public, not ever. I buried my face in the pillow so they wouldn't hear me cry. The tears came hot and angry, soaking the fabric, leaving me gasping. I thought about the dinners I'd cooked after long days, the nights I'd stayed up ironing his shirts before a big meeting, the weekends I'd spent running errands while he watched sports. It wasn't about the chores themselves. I had given them willingly, believing that's what love was. But now, all of it felt like I'd been giving myself away piece by piece to someone who saw me as nothing more than a joke. When he finally came into the bedroom, the clock on the nightstand glowed past midnight. I wiped my face quickly and rolled onto my side, pretending to sleep. He reeked of whiskey and food, humming off-key as he undressed. He didn't notice the tension in my shoulders, or maybe he did and didn't care. The mattress dipped under his weight, and within minutes his breathing turned heavy, steady. He was asleep like nothing had happened, as if the night had been just another successful party. I lay rigid, eyes wide open in the dark. I could hear my pulse in my ears. My throat burned from holding back sobs. The room smelled of him, the sheets pressed against my skin, and I felt trapped inside a life that had somehow become smaller than myself. That was the moment something cracked, not loud, not visible, but deep inside me. I couldn't name it then, but I knew I would never be able to pretend again. I had crossed an invisible line between denial and truth, and there was no going back. So I cried into the silence, letting each tear sink into the pillow, while beside me Jake slept like a man who thought he had won. The morning after that dinner, Jake was cheerful. He whistled while pouring coffee, kissed the top of my head like a doting husband, and asked if I'd remembered to pick up his dry cleaning. His ease unsettled me more than the insult itself. It told me he felt no guilt, no awareness, no reason to apologize. From that day forward, I started watching him differently. At the grocery store, I noticed how his eyes lingered on the cashier longer than necessary, how his smile turned playful in a way it never did with me anymore. At restaurants, he leaned toward waitresses, cracking jokes with a charm I used to believe belonged to me alone. One evening, while we walked through the mall, he slowed his steps just to turn and watch a woman in a short dress pass by. He didn't even hide it. Whenever I tried to talk about us, how distant we'd become, how tired I felt carrying the weight of our home, he brushed me aside. "You're overreacting. Don't be so sensitive." Sometimes he didn't answer at all, just scrolled through his phone while I spoke, nodding absently as if my words were background noise. The silence between us thickened. Meals together became short, mechanical. If I asked him to sit with me and watch a movie, he'd mutter something about being too busy. If I suggested a walk, he waved me off, claiming he needed rest. Yet I saw how quickly he found energy to laugh with strangers, to shine in other people's company. It was like living with a man who kept all his warmth locked away from me, reserving it for anyone but his wife. At first, my chest tightened with grief. I felt hollow, like a window no one looked through anymore. Nights became endless stretches of staring at the ceiling, wondering what I had done wrong, what piece of myself I had lost along the way. But grief doesn't last forever. Something shifted. One night, I caught him leaning over his phone, grinning at a message he didn't want me to see. When I asked what was so funny, he snapped the screen down and muttered, "Work stuff. You wouldn't get it." I walked away without pressing, but a new fire lit inside me. The ache in my chest hardened into something sharper. I thought about the years I had poured into him. Every meal, every sacrifice, every second I bent myself to fit his needs. And in return, he gave me humiliation, indifference, and wandering eyes. That was the night I whispered a promise into the dark, a vow he would never hear until it was too late. He thought his words had broken me. He thought I would keep shrinking, keep folding myself smaller to avoid his cruelty. But he was wrong. I lay there, staring into the dark while his steady breathing filled the room, and I repeated it silently until the words carved themselves into my bones. He will regret this. Every single word. I didn't explode. I didn't confront him or scream or beg for scraps of his attention. Instead, I turned inward. If he wasn't going to see me, then I needed to see myself. The first step was small. I walked past a flyer for a local fitness class at the community center. Bright letters advertising beginner sessions. No judgment, all welcome. Normally I would have crumpled it up and told myself I was too busy, too tired, too far gone. This time I folded it neatly into my purse and showed up on a Tuesday evening, wearing an old pair of leggings and a loose t-shirt. The room smelled faintly of rubber mats and lemon cleaner. Music pulsed through the speakers, and for the first time in years, I moved my body without worrying about how I looked. The instructor smiled, encouraging, never once making me feel out of place. I was clumsy, sweaty, and breathless, but I walked out of that class lighter, not in weight but in spirit. From there, I started choosing better meals, not because anyone told me to, but because I liked how it made me feel. I sliced vegetables late at night, experimenting with colors and flavors. I carried water everywhere. I slept more deeply. These weren't punishments, they were gifts I was finally giving myself. And then I opened the closet I hadn't touched in years. Dust clung to old dresses, shoes I used to wear when I went out with friends, jewelry tucked away in small boxes. I slipped on a dress one afternoon, just to see if it still fit. When I caught my reflection in the mirror, I hardly recognized the woman looking back. She was standing taller, shoulders pulled back, eyes sharper than I remembered. I decided she deserved more of my time. I texted people I hadn't spoken to in ages. A coffee date here, a casual lunch there. Slowly, I rebuilt pieces of my world that had crumbled under the weight of his neglect. Laughter with an old friend felt like oxygen filling my lungs. Conversations that weren't about errands or chores reminded me I was more than just someone's wife. Jake barely noticed. Most evenings he was glued to his phone or the television. When he did look at me, it was with that same mocking smirk. One night, as I slipped on a fitted blouse before heading out to meet a friend, he chuckled and said, "What's the point? No one's looking at you." The words hit, but not the way they used to. Instead of cutting me down, they fueled something inside me. For the first time, I didn't cry after he dismissed me. I didn't feel small. I felt defiant. Because deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't doing any of this for him. I was doing it for me. And that was exactly why it was working. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. I was folding laundry in the bedroom when Jake's jacket slipped off the chair. A receipt fluttered out of the pocket and landed at my feet. I picked it up without thinking. It was from a downtown hotel, the kind we had never stayed in together. The date was from the previous week, late at night. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to keep reading. 1 room, 2 occupants. Dinner and champagne added to the bill. My hands didn't shake. My pulse didn't race. I just slid the paper into my drawer and kept folding his shirts. Later that week, I overheard him in the garage, voice low but edged with a grin I hadn't heard directed at me in years. "Yeah, baby, I'll see you again soon. You looked incredible last night. I can't stop thinking about you." Her name slipped out in the next breath, Samantha. That was all I needed. I stood in the hallway, back pressed to the wall, listening as he chuckled softly, as though the sound of her voice had lit him up from the inside. A laugh he never saved for me anymore. I waited until he hung up, then returned to the kitchen, calmly rinsing dishes as though nothing had happened. Inside, something icy had replaced the ache. It wasn't shock. Not really. His flirtations, the way his eyes wandered, the excuses that never added up, it all pointed here. But having the name, the proof in my hand, changed everything. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I didn't even confront him. Instead, I stood at the sink with soap suds clinging to my wrists and thought, this is it. This is the truth I needed. That night, he came home later than usual. His hair was neatly styled, shirt crisp, the faint scent of a perfume I didn't wear clinging to his collar. He kissed my cheek absent-mindedly before heading straight for the shower. I sat at the table, staring at the empty chair across from me, and for the first time in years I didn't feel powerless. I felt steady, deliberate. The kind of calm you get when the worst thing you can imagine has already happened. Because once betrayal is laid bare, there's no fear left. Only clarity. As the water ran in the bathroom, I opened the drawer where the hotel receipt waited and placed it into a small folder. A folder that would soon grow heavier with every secret I uncovered. I knew what I had to do. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Jake thought he had the upper hand, thought I was still blind, still shrinking under his cruelty. He thought Samantha was his little secret. But secrets don't stay buried forever. And his would be the weapon I would use. For now, I smiled faintly at the quiet house, the hum of the dishwasher filling the air, and whispered to myself the words that steadied me. Now I know. And that means I win. Once the first crack appeared, I started noticing everything. Receipts tucked into his wallet. Credit card statements with charges he couldn't explain. A tie I didn't buy him, faint lipstick on the edge of a collar. Little breadcrumbs he left behind, careless because he thought I wasn't looking. I began collecting them quietly. A folder hidden deep inside my closet, beneath old blankets, became my vault. Each time I slipped something new inside, I felt my resolve harden. The folder wasn't just paper. It was my exit, my weapon, my freedom. I didn't stop at receipts. I listened. When he thought I was asleep, I caught fragments of his late-night calls, soft laughter, and whispered promises. Once, as he showered, I unlocked his phone long enough to snap photos of messages filled with pet names and hotel arrangements. Every word she sent him became another brick in the wall I was building around myself. All the while, I smiled at him across the table. I kissed his cheek when he left for work. I played the part of the oblivious wife so convincingly that he never suspected a thing. But beneath the surface, I was transforming. My body changed as I poured myself into the fitness classes. My clothes began to fit differently, sharper lines and brighter colors. Even my hair, once always tied back in a messy bun, now framed my face with purpose. Friends noticed first, commenting on how alive I seemed. Jake barely looked up. And when he did, his words dripped with contempt. "Trying a little hard, don't you think?" he sneered one evening as I adjusted my dress before heading out. But I didn't flinch anymore. His cruelty had lost its sting. I wore his scorn like armor. Quietly, I built the next part of my plan. I opened a bank account in my own name, depositing small amounts he would never miss. I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer downtown, the kind of meeting I used to imagine only other women needed. She listened patiently as I slid the folder across her desk, her expression sharpening with every page she turned. By the time we finished, I had a roadmap, clear, strategic, undeniable. Walking out of her office that day, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because the betrayal hurt less, but because now I had direction. And so I waited. Day after day, I lived alongside him like a shadow, watching him lie, watching him cheat, letting him believe he was clever. He had no idea the ground was shifting beneath him. The woman he thought he had broken was gone. In her place stood someone patient, deliberate, and dangerous in her silence. The moment would come. I wasn't rushing it. I wanted it perfect. For now, I let him laugh. I let him wander. I let him think he was winning. Because when the curtain finally fell, he would never see it coming. The night he invited his friends over again, I didn't protest. I cooked, set the table, even poured the wine, playing my role with perfect ease. Inside, though, my folder was ready. My trap was set. The living room filled with the same men who had laughed at me before, their voices carrying across the house. Jake, glass in hand, held court in the center, grinning like he owned the world. I sat quietly at the edge of the sofa, smiling politely, listening as he spun his stories. It didn't take long. He thrived on attention, and cruelty was his favorite currency. "Careful with the appetizers," he said loudly, nodding in my direction. "Emily might eat them all before you get a chance." Laughter rippled across the room, shallow and easy. But this time I didn't flinch. I didn't lower my eyes or force a smile. I stood slowly, smoothing the fabric of my dress, and reached for the folder tucked beneath the side table. The laughter faded when they saw the papers in my hands. "Since we're telling jokes," I said, my voice steady, "let me share one of Jake's favorites." I opened the folder and pulled out the first receipt. A hotel stay. Not with me. I laid it on the coffee table. Then another. Champagne dinners nights away. One by one, I placed them down, the paper whispering against the wood. Jake's smile faltered. "Emily, what the hell are you doing?" I ignored him, sliding out my phone. "And texts. Do you all want to hear what your buddy sends to Samantha? Because I have them." I read aloud, word for word, the syrupy promises he had typed in the dark, the declarations of love, the plans for weekends he had claimed were work trips. The room was silent now, every pair of eyes fixed on him. He shifted in his seat, face flushing, stammering half-formed excuses. That's not what it looks like. She's just it's complicated." "No." I cut in, my tone sharper than I'd ever allowed before. "It's not complicated. You called me a pig in front of all of you. You thought humiliating me made you strong. But strength isn't cruelty. And at least," I let the silence stretch, "at least I'm not a liar and a cheater." The words landed like a slap. One of his friends muttered something under his breath, shaking his head. Another pushed his chair back, disgust written plainly across his face. Jake reached for me, eyes wide, desperate now. "Emily, we don't need to do this here. Let's talk in private." But I stepped back, folder still in my hands, spine straight. For the first time in years, I wasn't the quiet shadow in the room. I was the storm, and he had nowhere to hide. After the silence settled, I gathered the papers from the table with steady hands. Jake kept sputtering excuses, his voice rising and cracking, but I didn't answer. His friends shifted uncomfortably, some staring at the floor, others watching me with a mixture of pity and respect. I didn't need to say more. The truth was already exposed, and the ugliness of it hung in the room heavier than smoke. I turned to him. "We're done, Jake." My voice was calm, flat, almost too quiet for the room, but it carried. Every syllable felt like steel. His face went pale. "Wait, what do you mean done? You can't just— Emily, come on, don't do this here." "I'm not doing anything here," I said. "This has been done for a long time. I'm just saying it out loud." I walked toward the door, folder in my hand, heels clicking softly against the hardwood. Behind me, chairs scraped as his friends stood awkwardly, unsure whether to follow me or stay. Jake lunged forward, catching my arm just before I reached the hallway. Please don't do this. It was a mistake. A stupid mistake. I'll stop, I swear. I'll fix everything. I pulled my arm free. His grip felt weaker than it used to, desperate instead of dominant. You can't fix what you broke, I said simply. What he didn't know was that my suitcase was already packed. I had tucked it into the trunk of my car earlier that day. Clothes, documents, the folder of evidence, even a few framed photos that mattered to me. I'd been ready for this moment long before tonight. My lawyer was waiting for my call. The papers were drafted, the accounts secure, the safety net in place. I wasn't leaving in anger. I was leaving with precision. Jake's voice cracked as he tried again. You don't mean this. You're just upset. You'll regret it tomorrow. Think about everything we've built, our life, our home. You can't throw it all away. I turned back just once, meeting his eyes. For years I had shrunk under that gaze, let it define me. Tonight it held nothing but panic, and I saw clearly how hollow his power really was. I already did, I said. And then I walked out, past the living room, past the stunned faces of his friends, past the kitchen where I had once cried over dirty dishes. The night air hit my skin like a baptism. Cool, clean, final. I slid into the driver's seat, closed the door, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt free. Behind me, the house that had once been my prison stood quiet. I didn't look back again. The divorce moved faster than I expected. The folder I'd built piece by piece did all the work for me. Receipts, texts, photos. Every page spoke louder than I ever could. My lawyer handled the meetings with sharp precision, sliding the evidence across polished tables while Jake sat there sweating, jaw tight, forced to swallow his lies in front of strangers. In the end, the settlement was fair, more than fair. I kept what mattered: stability, security, the means to start over. Jake didn't fight too hard once he realized how deep I'd dug. He signed the papers with a hand that trembled, eyes hollow, pride stripped away. But money wasn't the real cost. Word spread quickly. Friends who once toasted with him at dinner parties stopped answering his calls. The same men who had laughed at his jokes now looked at him with disgust. At work, whispers followed him down the halls. He had built his image on charm, but charm evaporates fast when people see what rots underneath. Respect is fragile. Once broken, it doesn't return. I didn't watch him unravel. I didn't need to. My life was elsewhere. I moved into a small apartment with tall windows that flooded the rooms with morning light. The first night I slept there, the silence wasn't heavy, it was peaceful. I bought furniture piece by piece, nothing extravagant, but chosen by me and for me. Every plate in the cupboard, every picture on the wall felt like a declaration. This is mine. Work came next. I applied for a position I'd once talked myself out of years ago, convinced Jake's career mattered more than mine. The interview was nerve-wracking, but I walked out smiling, certain I had finally spoken with my true voice. 2 weeks later, I started the job. My days filled with new challenges, new people, and for the first time in years, I felt useful in a way that had nothing to do with keeping someone else comfortable. Outside of work, I kept moving. Fitness wasn't punishment anymore, it was joy. I ran along river trails, sweat stinging my eyes, heart pounding with life. I joined weekend classes, not just to stay active, but to be surrounded by people who smiled at me without cruelty. And slowly, I stopped thinking about Jake. Not because the betrayal didn't matter, but because it no longer defined me. The pain had carved me into someone sharper, clearer, unafraid to take up space. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, I sat on my balcony with a glass of tea, watching the city lights flicker on. The air was cool, the kind that brushed against your skin and reminded you that the world keeps moving, no matter what storms you've walked through. I realized then that my journey had shifted. I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I wasn't proving anything to anyone. I was simply living, and that was more powerful than any victory I had imagined. He called me a fat pig, believing those words would cage me, keep me small, keep me silent. But the truth is, his cruelty built someone he never expected. Every insult, every dismissal, every betrayal, those were the bricks that built the strongest version of me. I won't pretend it was easy. There were nights I couldn't breathe from the weight of it, mornings where I didn't recognize myself in the mirror. But the woman who walked away was not the same woman who once cried herself to sleep beside him. She was steady, unshaken, and no longer willing to shrink to fit inside someone else's shadow. Betrayal has a way of convincing you that you're worthless, that love can only be conditional, that you should beg for crumbs. But here's the truth I learned. Someone else's betrayal does not define your value. It never has. It never will. I lost a husband, yes, but I gained myself. And that's a trade I would make every single time. So I want to ask you, do you think I made the right choice by walking away, or should I have given him another chance? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts.